Hey there, and welcome. I'm Anna Hartman, and this is Unreal Results, a podcast where I help you get better outcomes and gain the confidence that you can help anyone, even the most complex cases. Join me as I teach about the influence of the visceral organs and the nervous system on movement, pain, and injuries, all while shifting the paradigm of what whole body assessment and treatment really looks like. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Unreal Results podcast. I have a special guest, another guest podcast. With me today, my friend Daniela from Remade Wellness, which is her business. Daniela and I have known each other for a while now. We met via Instagram. She reached out to me. She had worked for EXOS, and so we had that familiarity, and she was just so sweet in my DMs. We started chatting, and I started giving her answers to her questions, and then she took my courses, and I got to know her more and learn about her journey, and I just am like so fascinated by it. And I felt like my world, including but also the world, needs to learn more about her and her journey and what she's putting out into the world. And so I wanted to bring her on, and she's also a good person for us to talk to because she's been through, I think, almost all of my education except for the in-person course, right? Which one of these days you'll get there. So so I'll let her do a formal introduction, but Daniela, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Anna.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
So give us your elevator pitch of who's Daniela.
I love and hate this question because I never know, like, where do I start? Where do I stop?
It is tough. It is tough.
All right. So I'm Daniela. I am a restorative movement practitioner, and I have a background in strength and conditioning. As you mentioned, I previously worked for EXOS in the corporate fitness sector of EXOS. And then I launched into working for myself full time. I launched Remade Wellness full time. And within that work, I help individuals that experience autoimmune disease incorporate movement and strength training into their life, into their healthcare plan and practice, to mostly to reconnect with their body. I guide people in that journey of going from experiencing disease to experiencing wellness, and kind of what is helping them establish for themselves what that journey looks like. And for me, it's all about creating this second chance at wellness. That's what Remade Wellness is founded upon, is the second chance to have a much more compassionate relationship with your body. And I am so passionate about that work because I've had my own experience with autoimmune disease. When I was about 15 or 16 years old, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. I was diagnosed with lupus. And through the last 15 years, they've discovered a lot of different modalities that have helped me to heal, primarily exercise and movement. And then I think in more recent years, the most notable changes have come from incorporating restorative and recovery practices into my life. And I am so confident in saying that that has been the thing that has helped me to get to where I am now, and that is being medication free. And I just started my medication free journey actually this year. So I think I'm about 5 months now, and I am just rocking and thriving right now.
I love that. I think that is the coolest thing. I mean, and there's so much to unpack with that.
Yeah.
One, you know, well, first of all, when you're just explaining sort of what you did, what you help people do, you reminded me of that quote that I love by, I think it's an A.T. Still quote, that, anyone can find the disease. The job of the practitioner is to find the health.
Yeah.
And I think that is just such a powerful way to go about thinking about things and working with people is, especially in the world of physical therapy and athletic training, where like when we evaluate someone, well, even medical doctors too, like when they evaluate someone, they're so quick to point out what's wrong with people, and they forget like all the rest of the things that are so amazing to it. Like my sister's a good example of that. She's had like a brain tumor, and she has Crohn's disease, and she has asthma. Like she has all these diagnoses, and so she thinks that she has terrible luck and she has terrible health and all these things. But I'm also like, but also on the flip side of that, you've survived a 22-hour brain surgery. You don't have a brain tumor anymore. You have seizures, but you're very functional on medicine and like deal with it. I was like, you have Crohn's disease and you've never been on medication for it, and you've had it for like half your life, and like the flare-ups suck, like you navigate it well. I'm like, you've had 2 kids, both of which were complicated pregnancies. I was like, to me, I see the opposite of like,
Yeah.
you are amazing. Like you have the best luck. You've survived all these things, and your body is doing exactly what it's designed to do, is like keep on going and survive. And I just feel like it's so important to like reframe things. Actually, my aunt texted me and my sister this other day, like she has this like blood disease slash like blood cancer sort of type thing. And she's 75, so she's at the, towards the end of her life. And she, well, I hope not. She thinks she's at towards the end of her life, but, and she was like, well, the doctor said I have a 2% or a 6-year survival, and within a 2% chance of getting cancer in the next 4 years, and like something else. And I was like, wait, so, and she was like, my sister was like, oh my God, like, is she gonna die in 6 years? And I was like, whoa, no, I read this as like, you have a 98% chance in the next 5 years of not developing into a cancer. I was
Yeah.
like, what are we like? I'm like, did we forget about the other math on the other
Yeah.
side of this? And so I just love that whenever we can kind of, look for the health and reframe. And this actually goes into a conversation we were having before I hit record. And one I'm very powerful, I feel very strongly about is like words matter. And words matter a lot with how you're talking to yourself, how you're talking to others, how you're talking to people about their bodies, about their illnesses or their health. And we just, I don't think people realize sometimes how powerful words are, and how we sort of like stick to labels
Yeah.
and believe those things from people. Like, I'm not going to believe the doctor that my aunt has a 6-year, like there's no way of knowing that. Like, we could literally
There's
walk
no way to know
right.
that. Yeah. It
I was like,
reminds
that's
me of this book I was reading, Between Heaven and Earth, and they were talking about like the point at which like healthcare became kind of what it is today, like Western healthcare.
yeah,
And at what point in time we kind of lost this faith in ourselves and started entrusting that to an outside source.
yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I say this all the time. Western medicine is absolutely needed, has performed
Oh,
a lot of
100.
miracles. And I mean, your sister being a very great example. But
Yeah,
like at the same time, we have lost trust in our bodies and that like connection with ourselves, that anytime we experience anything where we immediately go like, someone tell me what's wrong. But
yeah, yeah.
and I think what's been a huge shift for me is like recognizing that even those symptoms that come up and like feel like something is wrong are actually what's right. It's our body responding and communicating with us. And when I started to see symptoms as patterns of protection, like that was just a game changer,
Yeah.
as far as like the relationship that I held with my body, and a huge factor in helping me to be where I'm at today.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I mean, that is like, I mean, it goes down to like, I always think about how emotions and how what we feel in our how we feel in our body, and then also how emotions like stick with it is like I think in general most people don't like feeling their emotions. Like most of us are um I think it goes to like how we're raised as kids too. Like past a certain age, like if you are crying all the time, like you're shamed. Like
Yeah,
stop crying. Stop crying. Stop
exactly.
acting like a baby. Stop,
Being
just stop.
childish.
Right, stop being childish. We tell people to stop having emotions, like to stop emotionally
Yeah,
responding, or if people get angry, stop being angry. Like stop like we try to stop emotions from happening, and so we just start stuffing them, and by stuffing our emotions and not actually dealing with them, we start ignoring how we're feeling, and that carries over to symptoms in the body. We're just so used to ignoring them and ignoring what we're feeling because we don't allow us ourselves the space to process any of it. That
yeah. It's like that
and
dissociation.
exactly. It's like
Yeah,
we're like floating heads. Like we just don't want to know what's going on below. Like all we
yeah,
care about is up here. And so, and it masks it's actually very so funny where these conversations go. It's very like, from a yin and yang standpoint or like masculine feminine standpoint, it's like such a masculine way of being, which is such like championed in our patriarchal society.
absolutely.
And the feminine is like, all about feeling and like so it's like no wonder we've been like suppressed in that, right? Because that is not a quality that is championed in our society. And so, but
Yeah,
it is like the missing piece of us healing and the missing piece of us thriving in life is actually um being able to start, like you said, like reconnecting with your body, reconnecting with your feelings and recognizing feelings and symptoms as your body speaking to you and learning how to trust that and follow it.
yeah. I mean, that's been such a huge part of my journey. I had a pretty transformative experience about maybe like 18 months ago now, where I felt like I could finally release this identity as a sick person.
Mhm.
And, you know, since then, like I'm very mindful of the words that I use around talking about experiencing autoimmune disease or even having a lupus diagnosis. I no longer take that on as like, I have lupus or I'm a lupus warrior or a lupus thriver, and very mindful to not speak those things over myself. And I think once I like peeled back this like initial layer of an identity as a sick person, then like all of these repressed emotions like suddenly came to the surface. And I laugh because I sometimes like share this story, and it's like when I released who I call sick Daniela, right? Like my identity is a sick person. I like felt like I immediately saw angry Daniela just like sitting in the corner being like, "Oh good, is it my turn?" And it's just like all these emotions of anger that I learned and just out of necessity to repress as a child, as a teenager, were suddenly like coming to the surface. And now I, as an adult, like had the space and had the skill set to deal with them and to address those emotions. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was not pretty for a long time. And I think like for the majority of this year, it the kind of theme of my life has been reconciling with my anger
Mm,
and learning and understanding that like anger in itself is not a bad emotion. It's a very protective emotion. And if we can learn to interact with that emotion in a much healthier way, then those emotions don't get stored in our body. Because
mhm.
the root of systemic inflammation, autoimmune disease, is repressed anger. And that's like what people don't like to talk about, what people don't like to address. And that anger is what starts to create that inflammation in the body.
That's so interesting.
It
Really
is. It's so wild when you start to think about it. And I know it's uncomfortable to like start looking at those pieces because like no one wants to feel like autoimmune disease or any diagnosis is their fault. And it's never about like taking blame, but it's about acknowledging, you know, your body's experience
Yeah.
through your entire life. And I know, Anna, you've talked a lot about like the you don't call it the threat bucket, but the
Right. But the threat bucket,
yeah
I'll call it that. Yeah. Yeah. I call
the
it like
threat
the cup
bucket,
of
right?
compensation, but yeah, it's like
Yeah, the cup of compensation. There you go.
yeah.
All it's all this the
Yeah.
same
Threat
in
bucket.
theory, that the
Yeah.
threat bucket, that you everything you experience into your like through your entire life goes into this bucket, and all of those things add up. And when it overflows, that's when you experience those symptoms. That's when you experience autoimmune disease. But like when you go to the doctor in like, our Western modern approach, you're looking at all the like physical things, you're looking at the responses as the cause, right? Like you're looking at, oh, like you have autoimmune disease and that's what's causing your pain and inflammation and your fatigue, when really the autoimmune disease is like the effect of all of these other things
Right.
that we don't typically look at
Yeah.
from like a modern Western approach.
Yeah. So interesting. So, if you don't mind me asking, when you recognized that you had like all this anger and like that was like your big emotion that was like affecting your body so much, what are the things that you did to help it? Like, did you like, I always think of the people in my life that have anger issues. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like you just need to go to one of those rooms where you smash a bunch of shit up and
Yeah,
like
like
let
with
it
rage
out. Like
rooms.
physically, yeah, like physically just let out like, like bash in a freaking office printer like on the, office. So
That's
I'm curious.
one way to deal with
Yeah,
it.
I'm curious of what you did.
Yeah. Well, this is still like a fairly new journey for me,
Mhm.
and I think even now I'm just now like getting comfortable with like expressing it in a healthier way.
Yeah.
I think when when it initially came up for me, my immediate response, if I can just be like very honest, was to like put that onto my family.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend, go to therapy.
0 to 10
I've been
recommend.
in therapy, but it was my solution was like, okay, we need to have these conversations with people that were a part of those experiences. And what I was not prepared for was that while I was ready to have those conversations, no one else was.
Yeah.
And it kind of like really backfired. It, created a lot of tension, a lot of uncomfortable conversations, and it just kind of um, created even more frustration, more anger of not being listened to. And the thing that I have really learned in this process is learning to validate myself, and
Mhm.
then understanding what defending myself looks like in situations where I feel that I need defending, and can I defend
Yeah.
myself, and can that be enough? And asking myself the hard questions of, why do I feel like I need someone else to defend me or to validate me? Why is my own validation not enough? Right.
Right.
And it's like going through those questions, spent a lot of time in therapy and journaling, and then also using movement to release a lot of that. So there's been a lot of hitting the pillows, hitting the bolsters, screaming into the pillows. Those are
Yeah.
good. But then also on the flip side of that, so we think of like anger and rage as like very aggressive and powerful movements. But on the flip side of that, I've also have taken a much more gentler approach with caring for my body. The liver, interestingly, is like the seat of anger, as where anger
Yeah.
lives and can, create like problems in other areas of the body. And interestingly enough, like as part of my autoimmune experience, I dealt with elevated liver enzymes for a long time.
Yeah.
And to this day, I will live by the truth that the Da Vinci stretch that you taught me,
Yeah.
Anna, was
Yeah.
like it cured and healed my liver. But also spending a lot of time with like the Courgeous ball, or like a blanket, and kind of rolling through my abdomen, and just acknowledging it, right? Just
Yeah.
acknowledging that the anger is present, and like learning to be comfortable with it too. And then most recently, I've kind of taken on this journey of trying to understand why it's hard for me to just simply like release it, like this idea of let it go. right? That
Right.
I think that in itself is also like a way of shaming and
Yeah.
learning to understand like what does letting it go look like from not a hurry up and get rid of this, but letting it go from releasing it to be free.
Yeah.
And I was spending some time in like meditation through this, and I had this like vision of this tree that came to me, and my like task was to like pull up this tree, but I couldn't obviously because like it was very rooted. And then I was like told to like chop it at the roots, and it like didn't make sense to me, like why would I kill this tree? And then I realized that like this tree was actually me, which was angry Daniela.
Yeah.
If you just like vision me with some like flames,
Yeah.
that's angry
Yeah.
Daniela.
Inside out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Total
exactly.
feedback.
And chopping it at the roots was not necessarily intended to like kill angry Daniela or like kill this tree or like get rid of it, but to free her to come and go freely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if like those visionary exercises work for everyone, but they've been
Yeah.
really helpful for me. And I think the bigger theme here is just learning to spend time with my emotions and be willing to have conversations with my emotions with sick Daniela and angry Daniela. And there is a fun Daniela, I promise. And not just all these different versions of myself, of learning to be with myself and learning to have those conversations and create safety in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. That's so I mean, that's just like so much gold in there. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. It is it is cool. I mean, and it is so important for people to figure out. I think the underlying thing of any feeling is like really like spending the time like sitting with yourself and giving yourself the space to like be like, why do I feel it like this? Why do I feel like this? Why am I angry? And I think because you're right. People are like, let it go, and let it go instead of letting it be free, like you said, is like often let it go sometimes can feel like shaming and just ignore what you feel, which is just more stuffing of it and
More
like not
prepping.
processing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and I do, I'm a big like proponent of like the physical movement being part of it because, when you look at the nervous system type of thing, like when you're angry, when you're defending yourself, like you explained it, like when you're in defense, right? That is your
Hmm.
nervous system being in that fight or flight mode. And so fighting and flighting both both basically are mobilization of the organism, and that is the whole purpose of the sympathetic nervous system, is to mobilize the organ or organism and to mobilize. And so oftentimes that's what we need. So I realized this a while back in my sort of journey of like trying to heal my nervous system, which is like an ongoing thing, right? This is not like we
Yeah.
don't arrive at a healed spot, like because
Wouldn't
life
that be nice?
continues to happen without, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Life continues to happen, right? But I realized like my tendency was to gravitate towards like more, I would say, like, I don't want to say they're not movement, but like softer things like yoga and Pilates and breathing exercises and grounding, and which all stuff is great and wonderful and
Yeah.
has its place even within my body, but it wasn't really shifting my nervous system like I wanted it
Mhm.
to. And perhaps probably because I was so stuck in that nervous system that I was even towards the freeze mode. So it was just like staying in my freeze mode a little bit, with this excuse of like, well, these things are supposed to be good for your nervous system, so like it's easy and it's an easy way out. And what I realized though is what I needed was mobilization. Like I needed to work out and to work out a little harder at times, and in order to give my nervous system that mobilization and sort of like work my way back through, what
Yeah.
I've learned is the polyvagal ladder, but basically like work my way back through to the actual mobilization piece. And when I started, doing things like that are a little bit more aggressive of type of mobilizations, like strength training and like a little bit more high intensity cardio, let's say, I was starting to feel much better. And so a little bit of that too is sort of like paying attention of how you feel with it. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't until I tried it that I was like, actually, I actually feel more rested when I do this stuff, like, as opposed to the yoga. Like, yoga feels good, but it doesn't like shift anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is really important to just pay attention to what you need, because sometimes it is like the intense exercises that can help you feel more grounded, more secure. But then other times it's the gentle, the slow moving
Yeah.
that is really what you need.
Yeah. You know what was interesting too recently? We went to Disneyland over the summer. My sister and my nieces and I, and my brother-in-law was there too. And we went on one of my favorite rides is the Guardians of the Galaxy ride, which have you been to Disneyland? Do you know what that ride
Not
is?
in a long time. I don't
Okay.
think
Oh,
those
it's
are
probably
there
not there then. So
yet.
Guardians of the Galaxy is well, at Disney World, it would be the equivalent to the um Tower of Terror or the
Okay,
Hollywood.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Disney World. I think
Okay.
Disneyland when I was a baby, so it has been
Oh,
a
yeah,
very
yeah,
long
yeah.
time.
So 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 Guardians of the Galaxy is at California Adventure
Yeah.
in Disneyland in California. Um, and it's in the same building as the Tower of Terror used to be. Tower of Terror is not there anymore, but it's still at Disney World. But it's kind of the same concept of you like go up in like an elevator shaft in the top of the, and it like literally just drops you, right? So it's like it's scary. It's
Yeah.
so scary. And during it, and then also it like not only like drops you, but it also like shoots you up really fast. It's like just
Yeah.
it's very like
Jolting.
jolting. And there's a lot of fear in it too. I'm thinking of the
Yeah.
liver. So, you talked about how anger is in the seat of the liver, but fear is too, which
Mhm.
obviously fear and anger are very connected. Like you said, this anger is like actually you defending yourself, and
Very
usually you're
protective,
defending
yeah.
yourself if you're in fear. And I realized, because I'm kind of more the fear side of the liver thing. Like I'm very like liver dominant of patterns in my body, and I don't have a lot of anger. Like I'm like, again, to bring my sister into
Yeah.
this, my sister, she is like lives in anger. No surprise, knowing that she has an autoimmune disease as well, but she's like full of anger, and I am like the opposite. And we've been like that our whole life. Like I'm the really calm person, and she's the
Yeah.
less calm and more expressive and
Yeah, we're all
easily to
created
angle.
very differently.
Yes, but I like fear is something. I mean, fear is something we all discover. My fears are a lot of times they like have to do with like being alone. Anyways, when I was on that ride, I screamed. I've been on that ride a ton. I love that ride, but this time especially, the scream I let out was like this very deep, like primal scream that I can't remember the last time I screamed that loud. And when I screamed that loud, I also then started laughing hysterically, right? Which is sometimes like a pain and fear response too, is
Yeah.
laughing. But I felt absolutely amazing after that ride. And it was a realization of like, wow, I didn't know that I needed that like
Relief?
mobilization of my fear let out of my body. I like had no idea that I needed it. And then after I experienced it, I was like, yeah, I kind of feel like I need to go to Disneyland on a monthly basis just to scream like that. Like just to have something like I'm so used to like holding it all in because I'm also like an emotional stuffer in general. And that I was like, that just like forced it to all came out, and holy crap, that felt good. So,
Yeah, letting out a good scream every now and then is
oh my
so
gosh.
helpful, so
Holy
helpful.
cow. Anyways, kind of a side. thing, but that's what it made me think of. So I love that you love the Da Vinci exercise. I love that too. So I will definitely link that in the show notes for everyone. So is there any I mean, besides being able to feel better in your body, come off your medicine, which is like the hugest thing, is there anything from like a musculoskeletal standpoint that I know you talked about using the symptoms in your body as sort of a guide to how you're feeling? Is there anything, just kind of bring it back from back into the physical movement or pain genre? Is there anything that you can provide some insight in how you navigated that? Because I know me and you worked together for some musculoskeletal problems. And as a strength coach, like, how do you see this kind of like fitting into that world and fitting into,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think strength training has been just a big part of my life. Well, I was an athlete growing up. I did gymnastics, played soccer in high school. So I was always very active. But when I got to college, I didn't really like have that outlet anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going to the gym, and I started realizing like I really love how this makes me feel. But you have to keep in mind I was very, very young adult, a different point in my life. And I loved the empowerment that strength training gave me, because for me it was like a way to feel in control of a body that I felt I didn't have control over at the time.
Yeah.
When I started working for EXOS, I started learning about all these different recovery practices and kind of what did that look like incorporating recovery into strength training and creating a more well-rounded training program. And
Mm-hmm.
that started to like shift a lot of things for me. And it was no longer about just punishing my body for having symptoms, but it was about honoring my body and creating a more resilient body in the process. And for me, strength training has always been this like tiny dose of stress of here's some controlled stress, and then recovery is teaching my body that there is safety even when there is stress present, right?
Yeah.
And so it's strength training has been, of course, on the musculoskeletal side, creating a more resilient body,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then also helping to eliminate toxins and improving lymphatic flow and just functioning as a human. I had this theory like while I was like working at Exos that like, okay, all these strength training approaches help athletes improve performance. Can I take this approach into the autoimmune space,
Yeah.
right? And if I can somehow increase my humanness through strength training, would the disease decrease, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if instead of focusing on the disease itself and just managing the disease, can I focus on being a more functional human, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that involved just general strength training for functioning on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
Because autoimmune disease can be very degenerative depending on the diagnosis that you were given, right? Or that you were told. Like, I mean, it can be just by nature, hyperinflammation in the body can be degenerative to connective tissue. So, can I counter that with strength training and heavy
Yeah.
strength training at that? And for me, that was a way to not just train the musculoskeletal system, but to also train the immune system via the nervous system. And so, kind of started piecing all that together like, okay, all of these systems are actually connected. And the immune system, like, contrary to what I was told, that, like, oh, your immune system's just attacking your body because it's confused. Like, no, like, it wasn't working alone.
Yeah.
In fact, it was in connection with all these other systems. But strength training, I think, also helped me to realize that there was dysregulation in other systems as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was overtraining and under recovering. My nervous system was overstimulated and under rested, right? And all of that was having an impact on my immune system. And as I mentioned earlier, that like when you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, at least, I think this was 2008, back when I was told that like, oh, it is your immune system that is gone wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was told that my immune system was wrong. But in reality, like when you start to see the connection between your immune system and all of the other systems, you start to see that no, the immune system's not wrong. It's responding to the inputs that it has, right? And
Hmm.
it actually, autoimmune disease, autoimmune symptoms is actually a correct response to the amount of inputs that it's being given via all the other
Hmm.
dysregulation, right?
Yeah.
And so, strength training, when I learned to take a more progressive approach to strength training, became a way to help me regulate not just musculoskeletal, but also nervous system, my breathing, and also my immune system.
Yeah. That's awesome. How, when you decided with your doctor to come off the medicine, and you eventually did, what is your doctor saying about this? Like, because obviously you're like, not a ton of people ever come off their medicine. One, because they don't think it's possible, right? I'm hoping
Yeah.
you're like the Roger Bannister of immune, the immune autoimmune world, in terms of like, once people see it's possible,
Yeah.
it's people are gonna like strive for it, right? Like once he ran the mile under 4 minutes, like, nobody had done that, and then like 45 days later, another person did, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your doctor's thoughts were, like, continue to be. Like, are they amazed, or they just think you're like an outlier, or what?
Yes to all of that.
Yeah.
I've had experience with all of that. I remember when I was initially diagnosed with lupus, and then I was also seeing a nephrologist at the time because I had kidney involvement. I remember my doctor just making comments like, "Oh, you're such a good patient. Like you take your medicine every day and you are, having great results through like the treatment that I was having at the time because like you drink your water like you're supposed to, you're active." And I was like, "Doesn't everyone do this?" And like,
No.
"No, no, not at all." I was like, "Oh, okay." Um, but now as an adult, that working with my rheumatologist and wanting to get off medication, like it had never come up because I had never brought it up. And I
Yeah.
think that my doctor's job was to, make sure that everything was stable, that I was healthy, that I was able to, function on a day-to-day basis. It wasn't until like the fall of 2022 that I had asked, like, "Hey, can I actually reduce the dosage? Because I think
Mhm.
I'm doing really well." And he had said yes to that. And so we kind of tapered off. We just decreased it by maybe 100 milligrams at the time. I don't remember exactly what it was, but then I don't know what exactly, like what switch like flipped. I think it was around the time last year when I was like realizing like, okay, if all of these repressed emotions were the cause or were a huge contributor to autoimmune disease, like I'm dealing with them now, like is it possible to live free of autoimmune disease, and is it possible to live free of medication? And
Mhm.
it was just kind of an idea that came to me, I think. And then earlier this year, I think it was like February, I went to see my liver specialist, and he said, everything's looking good. Like you can just like keep your care at your rheumatologist. And for me, that was like such a huge win to like be dismissed from a doctor, to a doctor
Yeah.
tell me, say like, "I don't need to see you anymore. Like this is great." And it was such a huge win. And like at that point, all I saw was just one less doctor's appointment each year. Like
Yeah.
one less medical bill, like amazing. And then a couple months later, I had my like 6-month follow up with my rheumatologist, and it said, "I'm doing really well on like the tapered dosage. Is it possible to get off of medication?" And he said, "Yeah, go for it." Like, I was like, "What? I'm sorry. No, hold on." Because I had prepared this whole speech around like why I
And being
should be able
resist.
to get off medication.
Yeah.
And I was like, "You're not going to let me do the speech." And like, and I was just like, wait a minute, hold on, maybe not so fast. And he said, yeah, like there's no side effects to getting off Plaquenil. Like, just you can go for it. And I was like, I don't know about that. So I actually was the one that's like kind of pumped the brakes on that a little bit. And I said,
Yeah.
why don't we taper?
Yeah.
And he said, sure, you can like,
Yeah.
we made like a 3-month plan to taper and then to be completely off of medication by July. It was like July of this year. So he was very supportive, more so than I was of myself getting off of medication. However, I know that that's not necessarily like the story that everyone
Yeah.
experiences, but I think that he's known me and he's followed my journey for a long time. I think he knows that like I do the things that are required of being off of medication. Like, I live a generally very healthy lifestyle. I'm very active. I'm very mindful of how I nourish my body. I pay attention to hydration. Sleep can always use a little more work, but we're
Right.
getting there, right? And so I think he just like had that trust
Yeah.
in me to be able to, one, like be honest and like
Yeah.
handle the process of getting off of medication and then handle the process of being off of medication. And since then, like, that is just being off medication was like a huge life altering
Yeah.
moment, right? And it was almost like 15 years exactly to like when I was initially diagnosed. So like
Mhm.
I remember like getting out of that doctor's office and I just like called my mom. Like, we both cried because like, like autoimmune disease isn't just like the individual, it's like the family and everyone around that
Yeah.
individual that also experiences all of it. And so it was just like a huge win for like me and our entire family. And it was a really cool experience to like think like, okay, this is happening. But then, getting tapering and then getting off medication, being off of medication now has been a completely different experience. And it's
Yeah.
almost like I have had to learn and experience my body and everything else for the first time all over again,
Right.
because it was like, okay, yeah, I did strength training, I worked out on medication, but what does working out feel like? What does strength training feel like being off of medication? Can I handle the same load? What is my recovery practice going to look like? Can it be the same? Does it need to be more? Is it less? So I had all of these questions around what life is going to be like without medication.
Right.
And I think like around the same time is like when I started experiencing the like gastric reflux, and I
Mhm.
was like, why is my digestive system like all of a sudden like being so triggered? Like, I'm
Right.
eating generally the same, but had to remember, right? Like, everything I was eating before was with medication and
Yeah.
now it was without it. So I think my body was going through a relearning process,
Mhm.
and it was really important for me to really slow down and pay attention to like, okay, these are the things that I'm now experiencing. And now, being 5 months out, I'm a lot happier. I feel a lot better, right,
Yeah.
than even when I was on medication.
Yeah.
But it has been a different process to really learn my body of being off of medication.
Right. But it's nice because, like, while you're on medication, you learned all those tools, and so now that you're off, you know how to navigate a little better. You have,
Yeah.
like, solutions for how to support your rest and recovery, that you probably didn't have before, and so, like, you're ready for whatever your body throws at you, in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have had that conversation with people asking me about getting off of medication and um, the experience and the process of being off medication. And, it's kind of like any life change that anyone wants to make is kind of like you want to wait until the change happens to then kind of live this different life.
Right.
But that was exactly what I told people, is that learn the tools first. Like, learn the tools, implement the tools, practice and live by these tools before
Yeah,
getting off medication, because those are the tools that are going to help you get to a place where
yeah,
you can get off of medication.
for sure. That makes sense. Um, I think that's great. And what it reminded me of too, and why your doctor probably, like you said, he'd known you, he knows that you were doing all these things, as this comes up a lot when I talk to my athletes, and actually when I've talked to some of the orthopedic surgeons I've worked with about referring even people to me. It's like he's, one of the things is like the majority of people are not willing to work that hard to take care of themselves, to be in those spots. Like, because this comes out with people are like, well, do I have to have surgery for my meniscus, or do I have to have back surgery for my disc? And it's like, the studies really show us that no, that the long-term outcomes, whether you have surgery or not, are no different.
Yeah.
The difference is the timeline it takes to get to that long-term outcome, and the journey on that long-term outcome. And so it's like, if you want to put in the work and do the work to like strengthen things and keep your swelling at a minimum and like improve your mechanics, which often looks like taking steps back in the weight room before you can like get stronger, right? And it also looks like literally doing something for your body every single day.
Yeah.
I'm like, I always tell people, like, here are the options. You could do surgery and it like fixes the pathological thing, and so the recovery can start then, right? So it's a faster process. Or you can use your body to deal with the pathology and like rehab it, but it's a longer timeline
Yeah.
potentially. And not only a longer timeline, but it requires more investment of your time and money.
Yeah.
Or the option is like, you could do nothing, right? There's always three options. You could do the shortcut, the long one, or nothing. And the short one and the long one ultimately have the same long-term outcome, but obviously nothing is not ideal. But it's also, I always tell people, like, you're a grown-ass adult. It's your choice.
Right.
I'm not here to shame you or to convince you that one is better than the other. I'm not you. I don't know that. I'm like, there's no shame in picking the shortcut. And I think medicine sometimes is that for people. People don't want to work on their bodies. People don't want to take care of themselves all the time. It often feels easier to just take a pill. Most people, if given the option, especially if like, let's say now too, the pill didn't have a side effect, like,
Great.
which one would you take?
Obviously the faster route.
Exactly. So I feel like sometimes doctors don't even like let people know that it's an option to
That
not be
there's
on
a
medicine.
second longer option.
Right. Because they're inundated with hundreds and thousands of people in their practice that want the short outcome,
The
like just want
fast.
the easy
Yeah.
way out. And so it's like they almost forget, they become disheartened a little bit of like it's even an option. And so, it's rare. You're the type of patient that, I mean, your good doctor can probably attest to it, is like rare. Like he'll see one of you for probably every 1,000 other patients, to
Yeah.
be honest.
Yeah.
And so that I always tell people, like, you have a choice. And at any time, you have the option to change your mind in either direction.
Of course.
And so, but I'm like, it's always important that you have a choice. And so, that's great. Like, and like I said, like, hopefully people just realize, from your story that they do have a choice, and there's also tools that help them in that decision making,
Absolutely.
and that
And
journey.
it never has to be one or the other, right? I have this conversation a lot too with people think that like it either has to be like Western medicine or Eastern medicine, and the two like
Right.
cannot meet in the middle. But like that's actually my story, right? I was on medication for 15
Yeah.
years, but medication actually like gave me the headspace to be able to make the
Yeah.
changes that I needed to.
Yeah.
And then I was able to get off medication when I was at a place where I no longer needed it, right? Where my
Yeah.
body said, we no longer need this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't have to be one or the other. But I laugh when you were, talking about the two different options. I laugh because it kind of reminds me of like, you know, both you and I are in business, like we're entrepreneurs, we have our own
Yeah.
businesses. And, when you are creating offers for clients, you have business messaging of like you want to like get fast results for your clients, you want to give them easy wins, and that's like the offers that are going to sell the fastest, right?
Yeah.
And I have such a hard time reconciling with that because like my approach is not the like fast and easy route to like
Yeah.
we're talking about helping people remodel and restructure their immune systems, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not like a quick fix,
No.
but like I'm trying to sell people on like, here, change your whole identity around autoimmune disease and like how you identify as a person and start to change these things in your life. Like, do you think that is an easy step? Like,
Yeah, that's not easy.
no, absolutely not. But I, I'm very confident that I believe that it gives people the longest outcome, right?
Yeah.
And the most sustainable outcome in the long run. And I think that
Yeah.
people, at least like the clients I've worked with, like they have like being able to just see my clients go from being deep in the trenches of identifying as the disease that they were diagnosed with to learning to interact with their body in a much different way, and then to realize I'm a whole person. I'm a
Yeah.
whole person that just
Yeah.
happens to experience these symptoms as a result of the experiences I've had, the environment I live in, the environment that I carry within myself. Uh, if I can contribute and create the problem, then I can contribute and address the problem and be the solution, right? And it
Yeah.
is amazing. It is so amazing to be able to like be a part of that journey for people, and to use movement as a tool for that, to show people that they can be autonomous, that they can have control, and they aren't um they don't have to live at the mercy of this diagnosis for the rest of their lives, right?
Right.
Which I get. I was in that place too of saying like I'll never be able to travel because I'll always have like these really expensive medical bills, and like I'll never be able to be like too far away from my doctor in case I need him, and
Right.
I'll never be able to, I don't know, like there it was
Yeah.
just a lot of things that like where lupus was like the center of
Yeah.
my life, and I made decisions out of what was possible with lupus.
Yeah.
Now, like I am the center of my life and I'm making decisions for my life based on the things that I want. And I just happen to experience autoimmune symptoms on occasion when I
Yeah.
am under rested and overly stressed. So it's
Yeah.
like a very different perspective. But
Yeah.
yes, it sometimes is a hard sell to get people to take the slower, longer route because, of course, you want immediate results and you want to feel better quicker. Yes, like there's no denying that. But I think that the longer, slower approach is eons more in benefit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's one of those things of, not to turn this into like a business lesson, but it's like, I've always, my biggest thing, as I've been in business, I'm coming on 10 years now, is like realizing like, even though you want to help everyone and you could help everyone, not everybody is ready to change. Not
Right.
everybody's ready for you. And that means not everyone is the right person for you. Like,
Yeah.
not all athletes are the right person for me. And I know that. And I've gotten to the point where even if they think they are, like within the first session, I know if they really are or not. Like I will know, like,
Yeah.
you're not my guy. And also like being okay with that. And being okay with kind of like the thing, like at any time they can change and become the person
Of
that's
course.
appropriate. And so like, in terms of your business is like what you're doing is showing people what's possible and letting them know that it's a journey, but you have the tools to help them.
Yeah.
And if they're ready to take that long journey, like you're there for them. You're not promising them an overnight thing, but you're promising them hope, possibility, and tools to assist in their journey.
Yeah. It's that
Like,
second chance, right?
yeah.
It's like learning to interact with your body differently than you had
Mhm.
before because
Yeah.
if the first way worked, right, you
Yeah.
wouldn't still be there.
Exactly.
And it's a
Exactly.
second chance. And like for me, that's what it's always been about, is just like having this remade approach, like
Yeah.
doing it differently than it was done the first time to have a better
Mhm.
outcome.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. You know, and yeah, and just yeah, changing. I always tell people like when you're changing belief systems, like it comes with a lot of dissonance. It's like it's even when it's a belief that you don't want to have, like you didn't want to be the person that couldn't leave home because they didn't have the money because of medical bills and they didn't want to be away from your doctor. You didn't want that belief, but that was your deeply held belief. And when somebody challenges that, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so there is like changing paradigms, changing belief systems. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to change my mind. It's like, no, it is a fight. It is a fight, and it doesn't feel very good at
Yeah.
first.
And those things are so ingrained into your body, into like your navigation system, that it is very uncomfortable to
Yeah.
redirect and reframe those thoughts, or to even just like acknowledge that those thoughts are there,
Mhm.
that those like very limiting belief systems are present. And like you mentioned, that like those thoughts, like when you are challenged, when you're confronted with those, and those create anger, like
Yeah.
people in the autoimmune community are like often just want to focus on the emotions that res- have been a result of being diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I often have to be the one to break the news to them, like, no, those were the emotions that were present and helped to
Yeah.
create that disease to
Yeah.
begin with, right? And so, can like starting to unpack those is a heavy but really, really important part of
Yeah.
healing the body. Because
Yeah, I bet.
you mentioned earlier, like being angry, but I think just like holding any emotion, no matter what
Mhm.
emotion it is, does keep you in that fight or flight, like on a very low grade chronic
Yeah,
level over a
for sure.
long period of time. And you never truly rest
Yeah.
until that emotion is acknowledged and
Yeah.
validated.
Yeah. So good. Well, I know we're getting towards the end of our time, so I don't want to go over. But is there any sort of like last things that you want to say to the people before we go? I mean, we talked about a lot. I mean,
We
there's so
did
much
talk
to talk
about a
about,
lot. I
right?
think one of the best messages that I can give to anyone experiencing autoimmune disease, like whether or not you have a diagnosis, is that your body's not wrong.
Yeah.
And actually, your body is your best friend.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you
I love
can
that.
learn to see your body as your best friend and trust that it is always working for your good, for your benefit, the relationship that you develop with your own body is the tool that you need for healing. Like
Yeah.
that relationship is the center of your healing process. Like no matter what approach you take, right?
Yeah.
But rather you take like the fast or the slow approach, like knowing that your body is always working for you, even when it seems like it doesn't, right? And like
Yeah.
knowing that those symptoms, the things you experience that you have been told are wrong, are actually correct responses. And when you start to see like what has created those responses, like, whew, like you begin to have so much more compassion for your body and so much more
Mhm.
understanding. And like, I feel like I always get like so emotional about
Me too.
that,
Yeah.
because it's just like, if like if I had known this years, decades ago, like I think my story would have been different. But of course, things always happen as they're meant to. But like I oftentimes like just hold so much. I still hold so much sadness for
Yeah.
like sick Daniela and everything that she went through just to survive,
Yeah.
just to like survive and get by, because that's all that I knew at the time. But like looking back now and like realizing that everything my body was experiencing was a true and good response, like I just have so much compassion and
Yeah.
so much love. Like I just wish I could just hug like my 15-year-old self. And like I often tell the story about when I came home from my first chemotherapy treatment, and the very next morning I was just like crying and getting my backpack together because I had to go to school. And my mom was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have to go to school. I have to be normal. And I just re- I think back to that moment often, and I just want to like go back to that time and like give myself a hug and like tell myself like you don't have to go to school today, like
Yeah.
like you don't have to like prove to the world that you are more than this disease, right? Like
Mhm.
it taking things from the perspective of my body as my best friend, like there's nothing to prove there.
Right.
It's just knowing and holding that space for yourself. So
Yeah.
if I
I
can
love that.
impart any wisdom to your listeners,
Yeah. Yeah.
your body is your best friend.
Yeah. I mean, that always, I mean, I'm the same. Like, whenever that's often like my parting words for people too, is your
Yeah.
body's working for you, not against you.
Yeah.
And, man, yeah, when you realize that, you come with so much more kindness to yourself.
Yeah.
And when you come with kindness to yourself, you tend to come to kindness with others in the world too.
Yeah.
So, um, and yes, I feel the sadness part of it too, because you realize all the times that you were so not kind to yourself, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's also like, hey,
Here's your
remembering
second
that and,
chance.
like, changing it.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Here's your second
exactly, a
chance.
second chance. So speaking of a second chance and being remade, you have a podcast, right?
I do.
A
I
new
have a
podcast.
recently launched podcast called the Remade Life Podcast. And in that podcast, I share a lot about my journey of being diagnosed and getting to a point of being off medication, and then how I've incorporated strength training and exercise, and how movement has just been a very important piece of that journey.
Mhm.
And I would encourage you to follow along if you or
Yeah,
someone you know experiences autoimmune disease. I would love for you to share that podcast with them.
yeah. Yeah, so I'll link that in the show notes, and then people can work with you, virtually, right? Or, in
Absolutely.
person? Yeah,
Yes.
mhm.
So I have virtual and in-person opportunities if you are local to where I am in North Carolina. But I offer restorative bodywork sessions, and a lot of those sessions involve what I've learned from you, Anna, and I
Yeah,
guide my clients through the LTAP, those movement assessments, to help them identify where their body is holding tension. And that process is a peeling back of layers, of starting to peel back the layers of, of learning how your body communicates. What do these symptoms that you're experiencing, what is it telling you about your body's experience? And then we use movement to help release and start to restore those healing pathways in the body.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I will provide all the links for everyone to connect with you and connect with you, listen to your podcast, connect with you on Instagram and your
Absolutely.
website. And she's got a great newsletter too. So,
Thank you. I do
um, s-
have a free
yeah.
resource,
Oh, yeah.
if you don't mind me sharing.
Oh, yeah. Fair
So
away.
I wrote an ebook earlier this year. It's called Unlocking Your Body Secrets, Understanding Your Emotions and Healing Chronic Symptoms. And in
Love
that
it.
ebook, I talk about the importance of the mind body connection, of reestablishing that connection, between all the systems. And then I talk about the importance of the nervous system and the threat bucket, like we talked about today.
Hmm.
And then I also have a chart in there of kind of help to help you guide and narrow in on what possible unresolved emotions you may be experiencing, or what
Oh, I love that.
the emotions underlying the symptoms that you are experiencing as well. And of course, if you know me, I'm very good at like asking very reflective questions. So of course there are some reflection questions in there to also help you reconnect with your body.
I love that. Yes, I'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well,
Thank
because
you.
it's a great resource. So, well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to. I'm just excited to see how your business will grow and your effect on your community and, on the world and the industry, really. So, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Anna. I literally couldn't have done it without you. You have been such an important part of my journey and growing, not just personally and in like my own healthcare practice, but professionally as well. Like I love learning from you, and a lot of what I do stems from your work. So thank
I
you.
love that. You're welcome. My pleasure. All right. That's it for today's episode. So check out the show notes and check out Daniela, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.